Everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Experience Maker Live. I'm your host, Dan Gingiss, the Experience Maker. I'm a customer experience speaker and coach, and I am happy to be here with you every week with amazing guests. And we'll get to today's guest in just a moment. I do want to highlight for those that maybe don't know that I also have an audio podcast. It is called Experience This. I host it with my buddy, Joey Coleman. And we have been doing this now. We are in season 9. We're almost 160 episodes in, and every week we share 3 different customer experience stories. It is so much fun. I'm so proud of the content, and we get great feedback. So go to your favorite podcast app, anywhere you like to listen to podcasts, or even ask your friend Alexa or Google Play just to play the Experience This show, and you can check it out. You can also go to my website at dangingiss.com/experience this to check it out as well. All right, I am so excited to introduce to you today's guest. He is the EVP of Digital Experience and Customer Experience at Citizens Bank. His name is Lamont Young. Welcome to the show, Lamont.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for having me.
Hey, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time because you've got a really cool job and you are out there doing it at a big brand, and I'm excited to learn from you. So tell us a little bit about you and your background, how you got to where you're at.
Sure. So I've got a bit of an odd background, not necessarily a banker by trade, but certainly have been forged through the fire of retail banking. So background is traditional marketing. Started my career out in the fashion industry in New York. Ran a startup for a number of years, and that startup is what led me into the world of banking. My former employer was a former client of mine, which ultimately got me into banking. So I spent about 6 years at Bank of America before joining Citizens just over 9 years ago. I've held a variety of positions here at Citizens, which culminated into my role today, which is leading enterprise digital and our client experience group.
So you are another guy like me that started in marketing and moved into customer experience. How do you see those two parts of the organization engaging with each other today?
There was so much about both marketing and CX is about how do you influence the brand. If you think about how brands are built, it's about the promises that you actually make to key stakeholders and your ability to be able to sort of keep those promises, I think is ultimately what sort of makes the brand. And so marketing for me and CX go hand in hand in demonstrating those two things, right? Marketing is about demonstrating the value of the brand to consumers. CX is about making sure that you double down and ensure that customers are experiencing the very brand that you're putting out there. So myself and my peer, who is our enterprise head of marketing, are candidly in lockstep. We know that the actions that both of us drive impact our brand health index scores. They drive NPS and overall, drive the health of the client, whether it's our consumer bank or our commercial bank, or most importantly, our colleagues internally.
For sure, and we'll get to employees in just a second. But continuing on this marketing and CX talk here, and I agree with you that the marketing's role is really the promiser of what's to come. I'm curious at Citizens or in financial services more broadly, it seems to me that most marketing is around features and benefits, and I'm wondering whether there is a drive at all towards promising of an experience beyond the features and benefits. Because let's face it, most banks have roughly the same interest rates. They have roughly the same products. And so what I always preach is it's very difficult to compete on price and compete on product. And so what's left is experience. But I'm not sure I've seen among other banks necessarily the marketing moving that way. They're still talking about low interest rates, or they're talking about features and benefits. What are you seeing?
So I don't necessarily think those two things, Dan, are mutually exclusive. I think clients still shop for certain aspects or certain features of the banking experience, while at the same time, we've got to let clients know if we want deeper relationships about full experience that they can receive. So, whether it's content marketing, which we utilize to really talk to clients about, walking with them with their journey. Our entire tagline around Made Ready is just to focus on that. We want to be made ready for customers' ultimate life experiences. So I think what you're going to find is more financial institutions not only using their marketing as ways to talk about overarching experiences. And they're going to use things like content. They're going to use their social channels. Lots of brands have started to use what we do in the communities as ways to influence clients. That, we're here for the customers, not just financial journey, but really life's journey. And I don't say that facetiously. For most consumers, banks are involved in probably some of the largest life decisions that they make, whether it's buying a home or financing an education, buying your first car, how you retire. These are all important parts of the consumer's life. And I think we as financial institutions, without being overly biased, we as financial institutions play a very important role in those aspects of most consumers' lives.
Totally true. I love that tagline, "Made Ready." I think that's exactly what I was trying to get at, right? That is a tagline that is about the experience you're going to have when you bank with Citizens, which I think is so cool. Given that you had this up, how would you like customers to explain their experience with Citizens Bank? If you're sitting in a focus group and you said, all right, what's it like, and you're behind the wall, right? So they don't know you're there. And the question is, what's it like to bank with Citizens Bank? What is the answer that you hope for?
I hope positive to begin with, but I think it's really going to vary by customer. I think overall, I'm hoping clients have a very positive experience when they talk about the brand, but I want customers to actually have a very personal experience when they talk about their interaction with the brand. By personal experience, we offer clients a multitude of ways in order to interact with us. If we've got clients who only want to deal with us in the digital channels, then we want them to utilize our mobile apps, utilize online banking, and interact with us in that way. And we want to make sure they have the tools and the capabilities necessary in order to be able to do that. We've got over 1,000 branches that are available to service our clients within our retail footprint. So if customers want to interact with us in person, we've got thousands of bankers that are willing and able to help them in any aspect of their financial lives. And if clients want to call us on the phone, again, we want to be able to offer that opportunity to sort of do so. We've got robust capabilities in our commercial banking unit. Our commercial bankers are there to provide advice and guidance to commercial clients. And so, the ultimate way I would say, Dan, I'd love to sum it up from a client experience standpoint, is that, we offer clients, whether you're a commercial client or you're a consumer client, the type of advice and guidance necessary in order to meet life's financial journeys in whatever mechanism the client chooses to engage with us, online, in person, over the phone. To me, if somehow customers summed it up that way, I was able to get my advice and bank when, where, and how I wanted to me, that would be a win for Citizens.
Now, you touched on this a little bit, but where are you seeing customers wanting to engage with you? Obviously, as with almost every industry, there's I can't even say the words digital transformation anymore, because if you haven't transformed, you're way behind the scenes, right? Or you're behind the eight ball. But what are you seeing in terms of actual usage of digital versus in person versus other channels? And does that differ between your consumer and your commercial businesses?
So there's a slight difference in terms of aggregate usage between consumer and commercial, but we've done some client experience surveys, and in terms of what customers are looking for, there's not a very difference, right? The CFO of our commercial client is also a consumer in his personal life, and so if they're using digital tools within their personal lives, they want to be able to have similar tools to use in running and managing their businesses. So I think in terms of aspirations, there's not a major difference in terms of what consumers or commercial clients tell us what they want. In terms of delivery, though, there is a bit of a difference between the usage of self-service tools between commercial and consumer clients, and I think Citizens wouldn't be alone in terms of what that looks like. Trending wise, I think this is a trend that cuts across most of retail banking, where you're finding more and more consumers choosing to do their everyday transactional banking between your mobile apps and online banking, and then to the ATMs as well. COVID had a major impact on most of us as financial institutions, and I think brands across the spectrum, whether you were a grocer and all of a sudden you saw a surge in consumers actually ordering groceries from your mobile app and having those things delivered. I think we've all gone through a little bit of metamorphosis when it comes to the impacts of COVID. But in banking, we've seen that migration from physical channels to uses of more digital channels. We saw that years ago. And to the point you made earlier, candidly, it's not about digital transformation anymore. Our clients are already digital. In most cases, we're playing catch up.
Yeah. And it's interesting because there's still, I don't know if it's just a generational thing or not, but I'm a digital banker. I use all the digital channels. I like to self-serve. I rarely, if ever, find a reason to go into a branch. My dad, who's 80 almost, is has never used an ATM machine and refuses to because he likes walking into the bank and he likes when they say good morning, Mr. Gingiss, and he wants to talk to a human being, and that's just who he is. Is that really just my dad's generation, and then when they're gone, we're not going to need branches anymore? Or are you also seeing across generations still this desire for the in-person engagement?
Yeah, Dan, I don't think it's a generational thing. I think the role of the retail branches, particularly here in the US, is honestly here to stay. Now, will you have branch density be as dense as it is today, where you've got 20 bank branches within a 2 mile radius of each other? Probably not. Because what we find is millennials, Gen Z, even Gen X are using branches less. But there is a security around having a physical location to be able to go to. As clients actually move along on their journey of accumulating more wealth, there's something to be said about being able to physically go to a location, interact with a human, and talk about ways in which you can sort of manage your very complex financial lives. So I don't think the branches are necessarily going anywhere. I think the responsibility of the retail locations is going to change. They're going to be less transactional centers, and we're seeing it already today, right? Where a significant portion of transactions that used to happen in our retail branches are now happening through mobile banking or online banking. And I think that trend will continue. The retail locations will become more of advice centers, and we've seen a couple of brands go through that bit of metamorphosis. I think we're very, very proud of the investments that we're making in our colleagues, ensuring they have the right tools and skill sets necessary to support that next iteration of what the retail network will actually look like.
So these face-to-face interactions, one of the things that comes to mind when I hear you talk about it is that you mentioned all these life events and that how the financial system, the institution, is often involved in those life events, whether it's preparing for college or buying a home or buying or selling a business or something like that. But I also can't help but think that there's a lot of emotion behind one's finances, that it causes people stress, it causes people happiness. No money can't buy happiness, but it helps, And so how do you look at the emotional part of your customer experience, knowing that so many of these transactions really do really hit home for people? That's how important they are.
It's a great question. And it's one of the reasons why, from a client experience standpoint, we focus on both human and digital, because we know for consumers, there's a balance of the two. Our approach to how we take a look at experiences is through our viewpoint around end-to-end journeys. And so we've got a journey architecture team whose responsibility is to sort of map out what is the likely client experience through any journey. So if I'm buying a home, they develop segments of clients. These are the types of clients that are buying a home. You may have an experienced buyer that's on his or her third or fourth home. You may have a new home buyer that's going through a set of emotions. You may have somebody who might be first in their generation ever to own a piece of property. And so we not only map these personas out, but we really do go through the whole notion of sort of key emotional state at every stage in the journey. How do I feel when I'm first looking for that home? What do I feel like when I actually get a quote from a bank on, how much home I can afford, what my rate is? And so we try to make sure that we're building empathy in every portion of the process, whether that empathy is delivered by a client who is a human and has gone through the same process. I mean, by a colleague who's a human and has gone through the same process, or through one of our digital tools, right? The way we interact with clients when they're going through, especially these life-changing decisions, whether it's buying a home, refinancing student loans, buying a car, retiring, transferring wealth from parent to child. I mean, all of these things are, to your point, so human in nature, and we can't forget the fact that there's a human being behind every transaction. I think the
For
moment,
sure.
yeah, the moments as an institution that we get so proud about is when we get letters from clients. I've read letters where we refinanced a student loan for someone who may have been in a very, very high debt situation. Maybe they went to law school, or maybe they went to dental school, and they're sitting on a couple $100,000 in student debt. And we refinance that student loan, and their monthly payment gets cut in half, or they're saving $1,500 or $2,000 a month. And it's like, now I can buy that first home, or now I'm able to go out on vacation or do those things. And so I think oftentimes we forget that emotional connection behind the transaction.
Yeah, there's a life behind every customer, and I think it is so cool that your bank and the financial services institution as a whole plays such a big role. One thing, and I want to get we have a viewer question which I'm going to get to in just a second, but one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking about the digital empathy, which I think is so interesting, because you could have people saying, well, what do you mean? How can I show empathy on digital? Think about a situation where you're asking one of your customers, and I'm talking to the audience here broadly, and you're asking them about life changes. And let's say, for example, they tell you that they just had a baby. Well, the next thing digitally should probably be some form of congratulations or something that's celebratory, not just sort of just taking that as a data point and moving on, right? So there is an opportunity to show some humanness, some personality in digital. It's just that we often want to rush through that experience so fast we forget about things like that. Holy cow, our client just told us they had a baby. Like, whoa, that's big news. Let's at least take a second and acknowledge it. And I think the companies that are starting to do that, you feel like you're having almost a real engagement, even though it's digital. And I think that's so cool. Lisa Sedlak, one of our loyal viewers, has a great question. I think this is somewhat related. Any tips for providing good customer service when dealing with regulatory issues and laws that hinder what you can do for the customer? You don't have any regulations in the financial services industry, do you, Lamont?
What's funny is we often get this question, and I will tell you, and this is not a head nod to the regulators, but I think oftentimes the regulators get a bad rap, and somehow they're trying to stifle good client experience. I think the regulators certainly have a place in financial services. They keep obviously all the players honest, and I've never been in a situation where I felt like there was a regulatory reason why we couldn't provide good client experience. I think, the viewpoint is always making sure that if you want to push the envelope and be, forward thinking around how do you deliver unique client experiences, is to tie those back to sort of what the regulatory guidance actually is sort of today. And so we oftentimes in customer experience mapping sessions will actually bring in our key risk partners and our partners who are actually tied to the regulatory bodies. And we'll get an opportunity to be able to bounce ideas off of it. Is there anything that, the regulators would react to? Are there questions that we should answer before we're actually even asked? And I think oftentimes when you actually do that, when you have the right players from your organization involved at the very beginning, it keeps you from making those kinds of mistakes that come back and bite you on the back end. But again, I always say that that's a question that happens all the time. It's like the regulators are keeping us from providing good client experience. In most cases, they're not. It oftentimes is just making sure that your key regulators understand exactly what you're trying to do, and more importantly, how it actually impacts the end use client.
Couldn't agree with you more. I spent a lot of time in both financial services and healthcare, which could maybe be the only more regulated industry than financial services. And I felt like way too often people use the regulators as a crutch. It was an excuse for not doing something. And I believe what you believe too, that that fundamentally most regulations are there for the benefit of the customer. And so when you think about it from a customer experience perspective, the idea behind it, the premise of the regulation is great. We agree with it, right? We want our customers to understand what they're signing up for example. I think where things fall off the rails a little bit is where the regulators tell you how to accomplish it and set the rails so tight that you can't really, that there's no innovation around it. And so I would love for them to be able to say, hey, Lamont, the regulation is you've got to make sure that everyone that signs up for that takes out a loan understands the terms of the loan. But we're not going to tell you how to do that. We're just going to simply tell you that you have to prove to us that they understand it. Well, now you've got this open space to go figure out in an innovative, hopefully digital way to get people to understand what they're signing up for, which is one of your goals anyway, because you don't want people getting loans that they don't understand. So I do think that we lean too heavily on blaming the regulators or the lawyers or whatever as sort of an excuse. Your answer is brilliant to make sure that you have the risk people in the room. And I would also add, always have one of the lawyers in the room. And what I found interesting is the lawyers were often very creative about how to solve problems while staying within the lines. And versus you make all the decisions, you build all the entire campaign, and then you go to the lawyers at the end for the approval, and they say no, and now you're frustrated. But if they've been involved in the process, usually they're very I have found that they can that they can contribute quite a lot to creating the that kind of experience. So I
Absolutely.
applaud you on that. Anything,
Yeah, I
anything you
mean,
want to say?
most organizations like ours that are in healthcare or they're in insurance or they're in banking, the regulatory guidelines. And so for me, I'd always say, stay ahead, right? What the regulators are in most cases reacting to are ensuring the best interest of the client. And candidly, for us as institutions, it's important that we always keep what's in the best interest of the client at the forefront. So, to me, I'd say we always try to make sure that we're on our forward foot when it comes to regulations. If we're consistently doing the right thing by the client, two things will happen. The regulators will be satisfied because we're doing the right thing by the client. And more importantly, you'll get deeper relationships with the client because the client is satisfied that you're doing the right thing by them.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'd say one other thing is that regulations set the standards, but there's no rule that says you can't do better than that. And I
Absolutely.
think that's one of the things that gets missed. So, all right, the regulator says you have to send, we talked about buying a home, right? I mean, that process is filled with so much paperwork. It's unbelievable. But that doesn't mean that you can't, in addition,
Right.
have some part of the experience that explains it better to people so that because we know they're not reading all the documents. I mean, let's be honest, we wish they would, but they're not going to. So what can we do to still make sure that they understand what's going on and to explain it to them better? To me, that's an above and beyond versus just we can't do anything because the regulators say we have to write it in these words. Similarly, I've always wondered, I know there's some regulation that requires having to offer translations in different languages. And I always find it interesting that if I get a monthly statement from my bank, that I've got the 3 pages of translations in other languages that says, if you'd like this document in another language, here it is. But I've always wondered, why don't they just ask me what language I want it in? And when I say English, they can stop sending me those 3 pages of additional translated words, right? And so there's also sometimes steps that I think we can take to still follow the regulations, but understand how it impacts the experience and perhaps make it better. What I just suggest, is that even allowed?
So I'm not 100% sure, Dan, on whether or not that's allowed. I do think it's a great key for us to actually take back from an experience standpoint. I think in some cases, institutions just print all these things collectively together. So they print them in they're sort of in language. But I know preference tables are available for most institutions, ours as well, in terms of how you'd like your not only statements to be delivered from a language standpoint, but whether you'd like those digitally, or you like those in paper, et cetera. So,
yeah. So last question, because we're coming up on time. I want to talk a little bit about personalization, and specifically as you've been moving so much to digital, how do we maintain this aspect of, hey, we're your bank, we're here for you, we have a human relationship with you, but how do we specifically do that in digital so that there's a lot of data. I shared some in my book that says that customers really want to feel like the companies they do business with know them as a person instead of treating them like an account number. They want to be treated like a human. So what are you guys doing, or what can you do to personalize the digital experience?
Yeah, so like lots of banks, I mean, we sit on mountains of data around our clients. And so that notion of sort of knowing me as a customer, I think becomes pretty easy for banks if you're able to take that information that you have on clients and make it useful. Our goal obviously is not to play big brother around customers. The goal at the end of the day is to say, what information do we have for clients where we can make relevant, timely suggestions for them about things that actually will impact their financial lives. And I think that's not only a goal for us to be able to deepen, provide richer relationships with clients. Candidly, it's a responsibility for us to help make help our clients make smarter financial decisions. So what we're doing is we are using the data that we have, both our first party data, and in some cases we're using secondary and tertiary experience data to be able to provide those unique experiences for clients. So it's everything from, hey, Dan, we see that you've got duplicate transactions on your account, or you've got, you're subscribing to both Hulu and Netflix. Do you really need to subscribe to both of those? So simple transactional items to even more complex things like, real financial advice around things that you could be doing better, saving more, that sort of thing. And so we really do feel like it's important for us as an institution, as clients start to engage with us more on within the digital channels, to not forget about our ability to be able to take that rich data that we have on clients and translate that into some truly personalized experiences. Transactional data is great, but if I can't talk to Dan about, Dan versus talking to Dan about the, 2,000 other clients that I have that fit Dan's segment, then you're never going to have those deep relationships, kind of one-on-one relationships that we all ascribe to have with our clients.
Yeah, I love that example of the transactions, especially a proactive experience, right? That we noticed that there's a duplicate transaction. That gives me the feeling that you're looking out for me, that you have my back. And that's a good, warm feeling that you want from your financial institution. I've written about this before, but it's also interesting, as you were saying your example, you kept saying Dan, which is great because that is my name. The problem is oftentimes when I log into my financial services institution, it says, "Good morning, Daniel." And Daniel is my legal name, but it also is the only person that calls me Daniel is my mother, and only when she's mad at me. So I don't want you to call me Daniel. And in fact, when I get called Daniel, that's an instant hint to me that you don't know me, because nobody calls me that, right? But yet, okay, I understand. I had to put Daniel on my application because that's my legal name. These are the small things. And I think what happens is way too many companies think, oh, we're personalized because we have a screen that says "Good morning, so-and-so," and we put their first name in there. And so therefore we're done. We're personalized. Except not really, because you have too many Daniels out there that or people that go by their middle name, or that use an initial, or what have you. And we've all been victims of getting emails that say "Dear first name," right? So we know that personalization doesn't always work. But that's not being personalized. What Lamont just explained about understanding or proactively identifying, hey, this doesn't look right in your transactions, and we're not going to assume that you caught it. We're going to catch it for you. That is where the customer now says, hey, I'm working with a company that looks out for me, and this is why I bank here. And so I love that example. Lamont, I wish I could talk to you for hours more. How could people connect with you and or Citizens Bank if they'd like to learn more?
Sure. Well, one, Dan, thank you so much for having me on the show. To connect with me, you can find me on Twitter or Instagram. I'm at Digital Since 99. So Digital Since 99. And obviously, we'd love for folks to subscribe and follow Citizens on all the major platforms. We are just Citizens on all the major platforms, or if you type in Citizens Bank, you'll find us as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I know you are a busy man, so thank you for taking out the time today to talk with us. Great stuff. And I will continue following what you're doing, because you're doing an awesome job. So keep it up.
Thanks, sir.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here week after week. I hope you agree. I continue to find some amazing people in the space. And that's why I was so excited to talk to Lamont. And there are so many people like Lamont that are out there leading CX in organizations, doing it every day. If you have somebody you'd like to recommend to me, please reach out either on email, dan@dangingiss.com, or any of my social channels. I would love to continue bringing on amazing guests. Luckily, we are booked all the way, I think, through May. So we continue to have an amazing lineup. Speaking of which, next week, we are going to bring on James Robert Lay. We're going to stay in the banking industry. He is the author of Banking on Digital Growth and the CEO of the Digital Growth Institute, which helps financial services companies grow both their sales and marketing. So excited to have James Robert Lay, plus another guy that uses the same barber as I do. So he must be a cool guy. All right. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm Dan Gingiss, the Experience Maker. We'll see you next week. Have a great weekend.